Psalm 39 is a good companion to Psalm 38. In Psalm 38, David is expressing intense pain and suffering over his own sin and its consequences. And 39 might be seen as a response to Psalm 38, a continuation of Psalm 38. He seems to be experiencing God's discipline. He is blaming God, in effect, for what he is suffering. Psalm 38 does the same thing. Now, we don't know the exact situation David is dealing with here. We know that David was disciplined by God in many ways, following his adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah. There's very specific discipline that's spelled out in 2 Samuel chapter 12 that David will lose his son. His son will die, his infant son. David would experience in the course of his life the death of 2 infant children and 2 grown sons, both violently. And so David had promises that, God is not going to be mocked here. David, you have mocked God willfully through your immorality, and there are going to be consequences of that. So David seems to be experiencing that when he writes this psalm. By classification, it is a lament. Much of it is a form of complaint and with a request for relief. The psalm begins with David declaring, I'm not going to open my mouth. I'm done. I'm done talking. I have no more to say. He says, I will guard my ways. I'll not sin with my tongue. I'll guard my mouth with a muzzle. As long as the wicked are in my presence, I'm going to just not say anything. I was mute. I was silent. I held my peace. My distress grew worse. So it feels like he is keeping everything inside. He's repressing his anger. And then his heart became hot within him. He mused, fire burned, and then I spoke. And these are the words that come out. So 3 verses there, David describes how I can't speak. Have you ever been there? Have you ever had such anger and such frustration within you didn't know what to say or how to say it, and then it just kind of explodes? And that's sort of what happens here. And it does seem to be parallel to Psalm 38, the previous psalm, which David said there, I'm like a deaf man who don't hear. I don't open my mouth. I'm kind of numb. I'm speechless. So, and again, I think these 2 psalms are connected in this way. And when David speaks, the words that come out of his mouth are a simple prayer. God, let me know how long my life is. How much time do I have left? I've colored this yellow, and I color yellow throughout the Psalms to express text that has to do with wisdom. And so this is in that category of wisdom psalm, and this piece of it, even though the whole psalm is a lament. And his request is simply, I want to know how long I've got. And this is very similar to the language of Moses in Psalm 90. He says that all our days pass away under your wrath, that we may have 70, maybe 80 years, but even those 80 years are tough. They're toil and trouble, and soon they're gone and we fly away. And we call this God's wrath, and it's truly just our experience of mortality. Mortality is rough because it means that we're not going to live out life as long as we would like. We would always like to live longer. We'd always like to do more. There's always things that are left undone, and we live under the sentence of death. And David here is asking, just let me know how much longer I've got. How much time have I got? Because basically our days are like a few hand breadths. If you're measuring them, they're just a matter of inches. My lifetime is as nothing, and all mankind stands as a mere breath in view of God's eternal, timeless, everlasting nature. We are mere mortals, and human history is but a blink of an eye. Man goes about as a shadow, verse 6, for nothing they are in turmoil. Man heaps up wealth and doesn't know who will gather it. So even a life that seems to have a lot of accomplishments is going to end, and then what will happen to all those accomplishments? They'll just be marked down in the history book, and that's it. So it's rather discouraging, kind of depressing language, right? That we don't know how much time we have left. Life is short. And this is echoed in the New Testament in James 4, where he says, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What's your life? You're a mist that appears for a short time and then it vanishes. I know of a man that has really tried to keep this in mind as a motivating factor in his life. He actually has a full coffin in his office, and so every day at work he is aware of this fact that his days are numbered, his time is numbered. So make the most of the time that you have. Live with your mortality in clear view. There's an account that I follow on Twitter called Daily Death Reminder that just reminds you, you're mortal, you're going to die, so make the most of your time. I have a friend that actually has a countdown calendar in his office. He has calculated that based on life expectancy, about how many weeks that he has to live on average. And each week, start of each week, he rips one of those off to remind him, I'm not going to live forever. My life is but a breath. So live with that in mind, aware of your own mortality. So with that heaviness, then David turns to this statement of trust. Now, for what do I wait? My hope is in you. This is the central verse, the middle verse of the psalm. It's the only verse that expresses confidence. And sometimes in the Psalms, that's where we find the main idea of the psalm, or the heart of it is right in the center of it. And here it is in verse 7. My hope is in you. I wait in you. It's similar to the wisdom of Psalm 37. That was the main message of Psalm 37 as well. And that's how we're to respond when we're in situations like this, is ultimately our hope is in God. David turns to a request. He says, deliver me from all my transgressions. Don't make me the scorn of the fool. David here is acknowledging his own transgressions, that his sin has gotten him into this position. He repeats this idea of being mute and speechless. Notice the blaming here that's going on. For it is you, Lord, who have done it. Remove your stroke from me. I'm spent by the hostility of your hand. Again, very similar to Psalm 38. David understands his discipline that he is experiencing here is coming from God, and says, when you discipline a man who with rebukes for sin, you consume like a moth what is dear to him. Surely all mankind is a mere breath. An echo of those previous verses as David experiences God's discipline. He'll conclude with a sigh. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my cry. Hold not your peace at my tears, for I'm a sojourner with you, a guest like all my fathers. David says, I feel like a stranger with you. I am at your mercy. I am wandering in the wilderness, and I come to your tent, to your house, humbly asking for refuge, for hospitality. Verse 13 is pretty hard. Look away from me, that I may smile again before I depart and am no more. Well, he is hoping for some hospitality, to at least be a guest in God's house. He says, look away from me. Stop. Remove your hand of discipline. I can't endure it anymore. So the psalm ends on a rather negative note, rather unresolved. So we'd have to go back to verse 7 to get some hope here. And I think one of the applications of this psalm is that you're not the first person to be mad at God. David seems mad at God, although he knows that part of it is his own mortality. It's just the reality. It's just the way the world is. Death is inevitable. Sickness is inevitable. Hard times are inevitable. And he's not happy about it. He's just accepting of it and a little angry at God for it. You're not the first person to be mad at God. You won't be the last. And even Jesus protested in the garden at the cup of God's wrath that he was called upon to drink. He didn't want to do it, and yet he did nonetheless. And that serves as an example to us, as this psalm does as well, that when we are being disciplined by God for something we've done, or just by the fact that we're mortal, we need to recognize that Jesus himself could pray this prayer and did pray this prayer. He prayed for God's cup to pass from him, and yet he said, yet not my will, but yours be done. And so do we. We pray, God, not my will, but yours be done. We will wait for you. We will put our hope in you.